and welcome into another episode of Going to Attic Space. My name is Jason Boning. I'm the owner of Uni-Serve Air Conditioning in Houston, Texas, where we maintain, repair, and replace HVAC systems. Today, I want to answer some questions. As an AC company, we get a lot of questions from customers, and some of them are based on what we would call maybe myths in the industry or myths for AC systems. And so I want to just talk about some of those today. So I got 4 questions here, and these are maybe the top 4 questions that we've had, or at least the top 4 that come to mind recently. So the first one that we get a lot: does turning the thermostat down several degrees help my system cool faster? And so a common example, if say you have it set to 75, and instead of, say you want it at 72, instead of putting it on 72, you put it on 65, and then when it gets to 72, you'll change it up. Something like that, right? If you turn it down 5, 6 plus degrees, is it going to cool faster? So there's kind of 2 parts to this, and it's really based on the type of system that you have. And so let's start with answering it for single speed systems, which is what most people have. And so a single speed system means that the system's either on or it's off. And when it's on, it runs at 100%. So for those systems, your thermostat set point, it is not going to affect how fast your system cools. All right, so your system's either on at 100% or it's off. And so let's go back to that example. If your thermostat set to 75, if you put it at 72 or 65, it's simply turning the system on. It's not going to cool any faster or any slower depending on what you actually set the thermostat to. And once again, the reason is because it's either on or it's off. And when it's on, it's operating at 100%, and that's all it can do. Okay? And so I guess I should say the difference in temperature is just going to determine how long it's actually going to run. All right. So if you set it to 72, it's just going to run until it can get it to 72, and then it'll shut off. If you put it at 68, it'll run until it gets to 68, and then it'll turn off. It's not going to go any faster or any slower based on that temperature difference. Okay. So that's for a single speed system. For a variable speed system, then yes, there's going to be some difference there. And the reason why is because a variable speed system, it can operate at varying speeds. And a lot of that is going to be determined by the load that is perceived by the system. And so if it's set to 75 and you turn it to, say, 65 or 68, something in there, then the system's going to perceive that it's got a greater load to overcome. So it's going to operate at probably 100%. It's going to be at its maximum capacity to try to cool the system down. If you turn it to, say, 74 and it only has 1 degree that it has to overcome, then it may operate at 60, 70, maybe 80%, depending on, the brand. The different systems have different algorithms, whether it's American Standard or Amana or something else. They do have slightly different algorithms. It's going to look at humidity. Does it need to remove moisture? What's the load? Temperature different. It's going to consider all those things. And so, if it's just 1 degrees, it may take a little bit more time getting there. It's going to remove a little more humidity potentially. Whereas if you set it in, say, 70 or below, then it's probably just going to ramp up at 100% to try to cool as quickly as it can. So, to answer that question, a single speed system, no, it doesn't matter what the thermostat's set to, it's either on or off. Variable speed system, yeah, it's definitely going to take that temperature difference into consideration when determining what speed to operate at. All right, next question. Does my system need to be topped off with refrigerant periodically? In other words, do you need to add refrigerant to your system from, say, every spring to get it ready for the summer? Or some people say Freon. So Freon, that's a brand of refrigerant, all right? And so a lot of people say Freon, it's referred to as a refrigerant, and then Freon is just a brand. Um, but really, the idea there is that a lot of people think that they need to add refrigerant so that their system will operate better. So in reality, if you have to add refrigerant, it's because there's a leak in the system. Either there's a leak or it wasn't charged properly to begin with. So we've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, but the refrigerant in an AC system, it operates in a closed loop. And that closed loop is what we call the refrigeration cycle between the compressor, condenser, metering device, and evaporator coil. So it must be within a closed loop. And if it needs refrigerant, then more than likely there's a leak in the system somewhere, probably in the evaporator coil or in the condenser coil, and it's losing refrigerant, and for that reason, it's not cooling well enough. And so you could add refrigerant, but more than likely it's just going to leak back out again. Now, I think this whole idea is, I think it stems from when we had some of the older refrigerants back in, say, the 80s and 90s, and one of the most popular ones was R22. R22, it operates at a lot lower pressures than the refrigerants today. And so you could get away with just topping the system off, if you will, and maybe getting another year out of the system. With the refrigerants today, so we have 410A, which just started the phase out process here at the beginning of 2025. And then now we have also R32 and R454B. Those refrigerants operate at a lot higher pressure than R22. And so you really can't get away with just, hey, let's just add some refrigerant. Maybe you can for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month if it's slightly, just a tiny leak, if you will. But for the most part, just simply adding refrigerant is not a good idea. So if we see a system that's low on refrigerant, the first thing we're going to do is recommend that we look for that leak and see if it's something that can be repaired or replace that component, or if it's a really old system, we'll let you know, hey, it's probably not even worth replacing this because of the age, and so on and so forth. But anyways, to answer the question, no, it's not. You shouldn't be losing refrigerant to where you just need to top it off each year. That there's a bigger issue going on. All right, moving on. Will closing the vents in unused rooms save me money? And so we see this a lot. People have maybe a bigger home, the kids have moved out, whatever it may be. So they have some unoccupied rooms and they'll close the vents. We've even seen people tape over them, put something up that, lots of things that we've seen there. So that's really not a good idea for a few reasons. And let's talk about that. So first off, what that does is if you block off a supply register, then you're forcing more air into the other rooms, but you're also increasing the static pressure in that system. And the static pressure in the ductwork in our homes is already bad enough. So we've measured that in a ton of homes around the Houston area, and they're all a lot higher than what they should be to begin with. Just because a lot, when they were building these homes, they really didn't give a lot of consideration to the ductwork. So we're already at a disadvantage when it comes to the ductwork. And so if we start blocking some of that off and increasing the static pressure even more, what that's going to do is it's actually going to increase the amount of energy that blower motor in your system is using. All right, so it's going to cause the fan to use more energy to blow air into the other rooms in your home. So that's one thing. The other thing is, depending on how you block it out, like if you just simply, shut the grill and it's a metal grill, you're getting all that cold air on the back side of that grill, if you will. And then in the room, it's not getting any conditioned air, so it's going to start to get warm, probably build up some humidity. Then you start to have some issues with condensation on that grill because it's getting really cold on one side, hot on the other, and so you start to reach that dew point somewhere in there, and you'll start to condense. The moisture will start to condense on the face of that grill, and then that could lead to to other issues, right? We already have to deal with some of that condensation to begin with in this hot, humid environment. So if we start blocking off grills, it's gonna cause more issues. So yeah, long story short, there it's not a great idea. I definitely don't recommend closing off grills because it's gonna build up static pressure, can decrease the life of that blower motor, cause it to use more energy, can lead to condensation issues. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong with that. And so when we see that, we usually will open them and let the customer know what's going on. So yeah, keep that air flowing, keep all the spaces conditioned if you can, because I won't get too far deep in the weeds there, but if you start to have varying temperatures over the course, throughout different spaces in your home, that can lead to other issues where you start to get condensation on walls and could lead to various types of growth and stuff like that. And so we want to try to keep every room in your home conditioned. Okay, last question. How often do I really need to change my filters? And so we've heard all kinds of things here where, oh, I really just need to change them once a year, all kinds of interesting views there. But let's talk about it a little bit. So first off, there's all kinds of different filters that we can have in our homes. There's the MERV rating, which is basically how well it's going to filter the air. There's the type of filter. You may have it in a wall return grill or a ceiling return grill. You may have a media filter cabinet, so you have a media filter up in the attic. It could be an Aprilaire style filter. It can be a box style filter. This is really a loaded question, right? So let's just talk about media filters first. So if you have that big, thick 4 or 5 inch filter up in your attic, you can get away with only changing it every 3 to 6 months. There's a lot more surface area on those filters. We really like those filters because of that, and so it can last a lot longer. Now, it may not be sized appropriately for your system. That's another thing that we need to take a look at. But short answer there is you can get away with every 3 to 6 months depending on pets, kids, things like that. It's just the activity that's going on in your home. If it's a wall filter, we really recommend once every month. Maybe you can get away with 2 months, but we really recommend replacing it every month, especially if it's a higher MERV rating, meaning it's going to capture a lot more of the particles that are in the air. One of the things that we just did at Uni-Serve, we just released our new membership plans with our smart AC monitoring, where we can actually track the pressure difference and let you know when you need to change your filter. And so that's something that's really cool. But changing those filters is definitely something that is critical to your system. If you don't, that static pressure is going to be increased and your system's basically going to be starving for air. And so one way to think about it is if you breathe through your nose, if you cover up one side of your nose and then you just try to breathe through one side of your nose, like it's not comfortable, right? And so if you think about those filters getting plugged up in your system and that blower motor is trying to move the same amount of air, it's going to be starving for air, and it can lead to failure of that blower motor. So, all right, hopefully some of those answers help you, and yeah, very, very important things to talk about, and definitely some misconceptions that have happened over the years. And but anyways, there you have it. Hope that helps.